For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On July 4, 1991, 8-year-old Kevin Martinez vanished without a trace during a bustling family barbecue at his grandparents' home in Riverside, California. The bright, energetic second grader had been playing with his cousins in the backyard when he disappeared, leaving behind a devastated family and a mystery that would haunt the tight-knit community for years. Despite an extensive investigation involving local police, the FBI, and hundreds of volunteers, no trace of Kevin was ever found. The case became one of Riverside County's most perplexing missing child mysteries, with investigators pursuing countless leads that ultimately led nowhere. For 4 years, the Martinez family lived with the agonizing uncertainty of not knowing what had happened to their youngest child. The backyard where Kevin had last been seen playing became a constant reminder of their loss, and family gatherings were never the same. Then, in August 1995, neighbor Harold Chen was renovating his house next door to the Martinez family when he made a discovery that would finally provide answers to the questions that had tormented the community for 4 long years. Hidden behind a wall in his basement, Chen found a handwritten note that would not only solve Kevin's disappearance but would also expose a truth that no one could have imagined. This is the complete investigation into Kevin Martinez's disappearance, from the chaotic family gathering where he vanished to the shocking revelation that would emerge from a note that had been waiting 4 years to tell its story. Chapter 1. The Family Celebration. July 4, 1991 was a perfect summer day in Riverside, California, with clear skies and temperatures in the mid-80s. Ideal weather for the annual Independence Day barbecue at the Martinez family home on Oak Street. The celebration had been a tradition for over a decade, bringing together 3 generations of the extended Martinez family for food, games, and fireworks. Maria and Carlos Martinez had been hosting the July 4th gathering at their home since 1980, when they first moved to the modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet residential neighborhood. The backyard was spacious enough to accommodate the large family, with plenty of room for children to play while adults socialized around picnic tables. This year's celebration was particularly special because it marked the first time that all 4 Martinez grandchildren would be present. 8-year-old Kevin Martinez was the youngest of the group, joined by his older sister Sophia, 12, and their cousins Elena, 10, and Miguel, 9. Kevin Martinez was a bright, energetic child who had just finished 2nd grade at Riverside Elementary School. His teachers described him as curious and friendly, always eager to help classmates and participate in school activities. His family knew him as a happy child who loved playing soccer and collecting baseball cards. The barbecue began around noon, with approximately 20 family members gathering in the Martinez backyard. Carlos manned the grill while Maria and her daughters-in-law prepared side dishes and set up tables. The children immediately gravitated toward the large oak tree in the back corner of the yard, where they had always played during family gatherings. Kevin's parents, Roberto and Ana Martinez, were Carlos and Maria's youngest son and daughter-in-law. Roberto worked as a mechanic at a local auto shop, while Ana was a nurse at Riverside Community Hospital. They had been looking forward to the holiday celebration as a chance to relax and spend time with extended family. The backyard was a familiar and safe environment for Kevin, who had been attending these gatherings since he was a toddler. He knew every corner of his grandparents' property and was comfortable playing there with his sister and cousins under the watchful eyes of numerous adults. Around 2 p.m., the children were engaged in a game of hide-and-seek among the trees and bushes in the backyard. Kevin was particularly good at the game and often found creative hiding spots that challenged his older siblings and cousins to find him. Ana Martinez later told investigators that she had checked on the children around 2:15 p.m. and had seen Kevin hiding behind the large oak tree, giggling as his cousin Miguel searched for him. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Kevin at the family gathering. At approximately 2:30 p.m., Sofia Martinez approached her mother to ask where Kevin was, saying that they couldn't find him and he wasn't responding to their calls. Initially, Ana assumed that Kevin was simply hiding in a particularly good spot and would emerge when he got tired of the game. However, when Kevin hadn't appeared after 10 minutes of calling his name, the adults became concerned and began a systematic search of the backyard. They checked behind trees, under deck furniture, in the garden shed, and in every possible hiding place where an 8-year-old might conceal himself. The search quickly expanded to include the house itself, with family members checking bedrooms, closets, the basement, and the garage. They also searched the front yard and the immediate neighborhood, thinking that Kevin might have wandered away from the backyard. Carlos Martinez checked with neighbors on either side of the property to see if anyone had seen Kevin leave the backyard or noticed anything unusual. The neighbor to the east, Harold Chen, reported that he had been working in his garage all afternoon and hadn't seen Kevin or noticed any unusual activity. By 3 p.m., Kevin had been missing for approximately 30 minutes, and the family was becoming increasingly worried. Roberto and Ana made the decision to call the Riverside Police Department to report their son missing from the family gathering. The 911 call was received at 3:07 p.m. by dispatcher Linda Rodriguez, who immediately recognized the urgency of a missing child case and dispatched patrol units to the Martinez home. Officer James Wilson was the first to respond, arriving at the scene at 3:15 p.m. Officer Wilson's initial assessment was that Kevin had likely wandered away from the backyard and become lost in the surrounding neighborhood. However, the fact that Kevin was familiar with the area and that numerous adults had been present made his disappearance particularly concerning. The initial search was organized with family members and arriving police officers systematically checking the immediate area around the Martinez home. They expanded their search radius to include nearby parks, vacant lots, and any location where a curious 8-year-old might have wandered. By 4 p.m., additional police units had arrived, and the search had expanded to include several blocks around the Martinez home. The Riverside Police Department also contacted the Riverside County Sheriff's Office to request additional resources, including search dogs and helicopter support. The family barbecue that had begun as a joyful celebration had become a nightmare for the Martinez family. Instead of enjoying holiday festivities, they were now coordinating with law enforcement in a desperate search for Kevin, whose disappearance seemed impossible given the secure environment of his grandparents' backyard. As the afternoon wore on and Kevin remained missing, it became clear that this was not a simple case of a child wandering away from a family gathering. Something had happened to interrupt Kevin's game of hide-and-seek, and that something had left his family devastated and searching for answers that seemed impossible to find. Chapter 2. The search intensifies. The search for Kevin Martinez escalated dramatically on the evening of July 4, 1991, as law enforcement agencies throughout Riverside County mobilized to find the missing 8-year-old. The case had all the characteristics of a child abduction, given the secure environment from which Kevin had vanished and his young age. Detective Sarah Thompson of the Riverside Police Department was assigned as the lead investigator. With 10 years of experience in missing person cases, Thompson immediately recognized that time was critical in finding Kevin, especially if he had been abducted by someone with malicious intent. The investigation began with extensive interviews of all family members who had been present at the barbecue. Detective Thompson needed to establish a precise timeline of Kevin's activities and identify anyone who might have seen him after the last confirmed sighting at 2:15 p.m. The interviews revealed that the Martinez backyard had been constantly supervised by multiple adults throughout the afternoon. The fact that Kevin had vanished without anyone noticing his departure suggested either that he had left very quietly or that someone had taken him without attracting attention. Detective Thompson also interviewed the 4 children who had been playing with Kevin, focusing particularly on the hide-and-seek game that had been in progress when Kevin disappeared. The children provided consistent accounts of the game but couldn't explain how Kevin had simply vanished. Sophia Martinez, Kevin's 12-year-old sister, told investigators that Kevin had been excited about the game and had found several good hiding spots earlier in the afternoon. Kevin was really good at hiding, Sophia said. But he always came out when we called his name. He never stayed hidden this long. The physical search expanded on July 5 to include specialized resources from the Riverside County Sheriff's Office. Search and rescue teams with tracking dogs arrived at the Martinez home and began systematic coverage of all areas within a 2-mile radius of the backyard. The search dogs were given items of Kevin's clothing to establish his scent, then taken to various locations around the Martinez property. The dogs picked up Kevin's scent in the backyard but seemed to lose it near the back fence, suggesting that Kevin might have left the property in that direction. However, the area behind the Martinez property was densely developed with other residential homes, making it unlikely that Kevin could have traveled far without being seen by neighbors or residents. The search teams methodically checked every yard, shed, and building in the surrounding area. The FBI joined the investigation on July 6, bringing federal resources and expertise in child abduction cases. Special Agent Michael Kim was assigned as the federal lead investigator and immediately began coordinating with local authorities to expand the scope of the investigation. Agent Kim's first priority was to investigate everyone who had been present at the barbecue, as well as anyone who might have had access to the Martinez property during the celebration. This included family members, neighbors, and any service providers or delivery personnel who might have been in the area. The investigation revealed that the Martinez family was well regarded in their community, with no apparent enemies or conflicts that might have motivated someone to target Kevin. The family had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade and had developed friendly relationships with most of their neighbors. However, investigators did identify several individuals who warranted closer examination. These included a few family members who had criminal backgrounds and neighbors who had access to views of the Martinez backyard from their own properties. One person who attracted investigators' attention was Harold Chen, the neighbor whose property adjoined the Martinez backyard. Chen had been present at his home during the barbecue and had reported seeing nothing unusual, but his proximity to the scene made him a potential witness or person of interest. Chen, a 45-year-old retired machinist who lived alone, had been living next to the Martinez family for about 5 years. He was generally regarded as a quiet, private person who kept to himself but maintained cordial relationships with his neighbors. When questioned by investigators, Chen reported that he had been working in his garage during the afternoon of July 4th and had not seen Kevin or noticed any unusual activity in the Martinez backyard. He claimed to have first learned about Kevin's disappearance when police officers began canvassing the neighborhood. Chen's background check revealed no criminal history or concerning behavior, though some neighbors described him as somewhat eccentric and overly interested in the activities of families with children. However, this information was not specific enough to make him a serious suspect. The search for Kevin continued throughout July 1991, with volunteers from the Riverside community joining law enforcement in checking parks, vacant lots, construction sites, and any location where a child might be hidden or held. The effort involved hundreds of people and covered dozens of square miles. The case received extensive media coverage throughout Southern California, with Kevin's photograph appearing on television news programs and in newspapers. The publicity generated numerous tips from the public, but most proved to be false leads or cases of mistaken identity. One tip that seemed particularly promising came from a convenience store clerk who reported seeing a boy matching Kevin's description with an older man on the evening of July 4th. However, investigation revealed that the sighting had occurred before Kevin's disappearance and involved a different child entirely. As July turned into August 1991, Kevin Martinez had been missing for nearly a month without any confirmed sightings or physical evidence. The massive search effort had covered hundreds of square miles and involved thousands of hours of volunteer time, but had produced no concrete leads about Kevin's whereabouts. The investigation continued with reduced intensity as the initial urgency gave way to the grim reality that Kevin might not be found quickly. Detective Thompson and FBI agent Kim continued to pursue leads and review evidence, but the case was beginning to take on the characteristics of a long-term missing person investigation. For the Martinez family, the transition from active search to ongoing investigation was heartbreaking. They had to accept that their daily lives would continue without knowing what had happened to Kevin, while never giving up hope that he might somehow still be alive and would eventually be found. The backyard where Kevin had last been seen became a shrine to his memory, with family members often sitting under the oak tree where he had been playing on that tragic July 4th afternoon. The annual family barbecue was canceled indefinitely, as the location held too many painful memories for the family to bear. Chapter 3: Years of Uncertainty. The years following Kevin Martinez's disappearance were marked by persistent efforts from his family and law enforcement to keep the case alive, despite the gradual fading of public attention and the emotional toll of living with unanswered questions. Roberto and Ana Martinez became tireless advocates for their missing son, working with organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and establishing a foundation to support other families dealing with missing children. They refused to give up hope that Kevin might someday be found alive. The couple also hired private investigator Patricia Walsh in 1992 to continue searching for Kevin when it became clear that the official investigation had exhausted its immediate leads. Walsh brought fresh perspective to the case and had extensive contacts throughout the law enforcement community. Walsh's investigation focused on the possibility that Kevin had been abducted by someone involved in child trafficking, a problem that law enforcement was beginning to recognize as more widespread than previously understood. However, this line of investigation required extensive resources and coordination. Detective Thompson continued to review Kevin's case file regularly, looking for any connections to similar cases in other jurisdictions. She maintained contact with the FBI and participated in task forces focused on missing children cases throughout California and the Southwest. In 1992, 1 year after Kevin's disappearance, the case was featured on the television show America's Most Wanted. The program included interviews with Kevin's family, investigators involved in the case, and a reconstruction of the events at the July 4th barbecue. The television exposure generated hundreds of tips from viewers across the country, but most followed the pattern of previous leads, reported sightings that couldn't be confirmed or theories that lacked supporting evidence. However, the show did succeed in keeping Kevin's case in the national consciousness. One tip that seemed particularly credible came from a woman in Arizona who reported seeing a boy matching Kevin's description at a shopping mall in Phoenix in late 1991. The witness provided specific details about the boy's appearance and behavior that seemed consistent with Kevin's characteristics. Investigators traveled to Arizona to follow up on this lead, interviewing the witness and reviewing security footage from the shopping mall. However, the footage was too unclear to make a positive identification, and the lead ultimately proved to be another dead end. The accumulation of false leads was emotionally exhausting for the Martinez family. Each tip brought renewed hope followed by crushing disappointment when it didn't provide answers about Kevin's fate. Ana Martinez later described this period as living between hope and despair. In 1993, the case received renewed attention when it was connected to a task force investigating a potential serial predator who might have been active in Southern California during the early 1990s. However, this investigation eventually determined that the suspected individual had not been in the Riverside area at the time of Kevin's disappearance. Meanwhile, life in the Martinez neighborhood had continued, though Kevin's absence was still felt by those who had known him. The annual July 4th celebration that had been a community tradition was never resumed, and the date became a day of remembrance rather than celebration for the family. Harold Chen, the neighbor who lived next to the Martinez family, had continued his quiet lifestyle throughout the investigation. He had cooperated with investigators when questioned and had expressed sympathy for the family's loss, though some neighbors noted that he seemed uncomfortable when the subject of Kevin's disappearance was discussed. In 1994, 3 years after Kevin's disappearance, Chen decided to undertake a major renovation of his house. The project would involve updating the electrical system, plumbing, and structural elements that had deteriorated over the years since the house was built in the 1960s. Chen hired a local contractor to manage the renovation work, which was expected to take several months to complete. The project would require opening walls throughout the house to access utilities and make necessary improvements to bring the property up to current building codes. During the renovation process, Chen was required to temporarily relocate to a motel while workers had access to his home. He visited the property regularly to check on progress and to make decisions about various aspects of the renovation work. The renovation proceeded slowly throughout 1994 and into 1995, with workers discovering various issues that required additional time and money to address. Chen became increasingly frustrated with the delays and cost overruns, but was committed to completing the project. In August 1995, as the renovation was nearing completion, Chen returned to his house to conduct a final inspection before moving back in. He was examining work that had been done in the basement when he noticed something unusual behind a wall that had been partially opened for electrical work. Wedged behind the wall studs, Chen found what appeared to be a folded piece of paper that had been deliberately hidden in the space between the walls. The paper looked old and yellowed, suggesting it had been there for a considerable time. Chen carefully extracted the paper from its hiding place and unfolded it to reveal a handwritten note. As he read the contents, he realized that he had discovered evidence that would finally solve the mystery of Kevin Martinez's disappearance and expose a truth that would shock the entire community. The note had been waiting 4 years to be discovered, hidden in a location where it might never have been found if not for the renovation work that had opened the walls of Chen's house. The contents of that note would change everything that investigators and the Martinez family thought they knew about Kevin's fate. Chapter 4. The Hidden Note. August 22, 1995 was a humid summer evening when Harold Chen made the discovery that would finally solve the Kevin Martinez case. Chen had returned to his house on Oak Street to inspect the renovation work that was nearing completion after more than a year of construction. The basement renovation had required opening several walls to upgrade the electrical system and install new plumbing. Chen was examining the quality of the work when he noticed something unusual protruding from behind a wall stud in an area that hadn't been completely closed up yet. Wedged deep between the wall studs was a folded piece of notebook paper that appeared to have been deliberately placed there. The paper was yellowed and slightly damp from the basement environment, suggesting it had been hidden for a considerable time. Chen carefully extracted the paper from its hiding place, using a flashlight to see into the narrow space between the studs. The paper had been folded multiple times and compressed into a small square, as if someone had wanted to make it as inconspicuous as possible. When Chen unfolded the paper, he found himself looking at a handwritten note that was clearly the work of a child. The writing was in pencil, with the uneven lettering characteristic of someone who was just learning to write in cursive. At the top of the page was a name, Kevin Martinez. The note was brief but devastating in its implications. "Help me. I am in the basement next door. The man said he would hurt my family if I made noise. I am scared. I tried to be quiet, but I think he is going to hurt me. Please find me. Tell my mom and dad I love them. Kevin." Below the main message were several additional lines that appear to have been written at different times, suggesting that Kevin had been held captive for a period of time. Day 2. Still here. Very hungry. Day 3. I hear my family calling for me outside. Day 4. I don't think anyone is coming. Chen immediately understood the horrifying implications of what he had discovered. The note indicated that Kevin Martinez had been held captive in a basement next door to his own house, a basement that could only be the one where Chen was now standing. The realization that Kevin had been imprisoned in his own basement while he had been living upstairs was overwhelming and terrifying. Chen had been questioned by investigators about Kevin's disappearance and had denied any knowledge of what had happened to the boy. However, the note suggested a different and more complex explanation for Kevin's fate. The handwriting and content indicated that Kevin had been held captive, but also suggested that someone else had been responsible for imprisoning him in Chen's basement. Chen's mind raced as he tried to understand how Kevin could have ended up in his basement without his knowledge. The house had only one entrance to the basement, through the kitchen, and Chen was certain that he would have noticed if someone had been holding a child there. However, as Chen examined the basement more carefully, he noticed something he had never paid attention to before. In the corner where the note had been hidden, there was a small window that provided access to the basement from outside. The window was partially hidden by bushes and would not be visible from most angles. The window was old and had been painted shut for years, but Chen could see signs that it had been forced open at some point. Scratches around the frame and damaged paint suggested that someone had broken into the basement through this window. Chen realized that someone could have accessed his basement without his knowledge, especially if they had been careful to avoid making noise while he was sleeping or away from the house. The basement was at the opposite end of the house from his bedroom, and sounds from the basement might not have been audible upstairs. The note also explained some strange observations that Chen had dismissed at the time of Kevin's disappearance. He remembered finding the basement door unlocked on a few occasions in July 1991, though he was certain he had locked it. He had also noticed that some food items had gone missing from his pantry. Chen understood that he needed to contact law enforcement immediately, but he also realized that the discovery of the note in his basement would make him a suspect in Kevin's disappearance. The evidence suggested that Kevin had been held in Chen's house, even if Chen himself hadn't been aware of it. Using his cell phone, Chen called the Riverside Police Department and asked to speak with Detective Thompson, who had been the lead investigator on Kevin's case. When Thompson wasn't immediately available, Chen left a detailed message about his discovery and requested that she contact him as soon as possible. Detective Thompson returned Chen's call within an hour and immediately recognized the potential significance of his discovery. She advised Chen not to disturb the basement area any further and arranged to meet with him that evening to examine the note and the location where it had been found. When Detective Thompson arrived at Chen's house, She was accompanied by FBI agent Kim and a forensics team. They carefully documented the location where the note had been found and began a systematic examination of the basement for any additional evidence. The forensic examination revealed several pieces of evidence that had been missed during the original investigation in 1991. In addition to the note, investigators found traces of food wrappers, evidence of recent disturbance in the basement's dirt floor, and signs that someone had been living in the space for several days. Most significantly, the forensic team discovered human remains buried in a shallow grave in the basement's dirt floor. The remains were clearly those of a child and were found in the exact area where Kevin's note indicated he had been held captive. The discovery of Kevin's body finally provided answers about his fate, but it also raised new questions about who had been responsible for his imprisonment and murder. The note suggested that someone other than Chen had been holding Kevin in the basement, but investigators needed to determine who that person was and how they had gained access to Chen's house. The note found behind the wall had been Kevin's desperate attempt to communicate with the outside world and document his captivity. It would prove to be the key evidence needed to finally solve his disappearance and bring his killer to justice. Chapter 5: Unraveling the Truth. The discovery of Kevin Martinez's note and remains in Harold Chen's basement prompted an immediate and intensive reinvestigation of the case. Detective Thompson assembled a task force that included FBI specialists, forensic experts, and investigators from multiple agencies to analyze the new evidence and determine how Kevin had ended up in Chen's basement. The forensic examination of Kevin's remains confirmed that he had died from asphyxiation, most likely from being confined in a small space with limited air circulation. The condition of the remains was consistent with Kevin having been buried shortly after his death in July 1991. The note itself became a crucial piece of evidence, not only because it documented Kevin's captivity but also because it provided clues about his captor. Handwriting analysis confirmed that the note had been written by Kevin, and the content suggested that he had been held by someone who had threatened his family. Investigators focused on the method by which Kevin's captor had accessed Chen's basement. The forced basement window provided a clear entry point, but it also raised questions about who would have known about this access route and how they could have used it without detection. The investigation revealed that the basement window was not visible from most angles around Chen's property, but it could be seen from certain vantage points in the Martinez backyard. This suggested that Kevin's captor had been familiar with both properties and had planned the abduction carefully. Detective Thompson re-interviewed all family members who had been present at the July 4th barbecue, focusing on anyone who might have had knowledge of Chen's basement window or who could have observed Kevin's movements during the celebration. The reinvestigation also examined Chen's activities and whereabouts during the period when Kevin had been held captive. Chen's work records and personal calendar showed that he had been away from his house for extended periods during early July 1991, providing opportunities for someone to use his basement without detection. Chen himself underwent extensive questioning and polygraph testing, but the results consistently indicated that he had not been aware of Kevin's presence in his basement. The evidence suggested that someone had used Chen's property without his knowledge or consent. A breakthrough in the case came when investigators discovered that one family member who had been present at the barbecue had lied about his activities during the crucial time period. Miguel Santos, Kevin's uncle, had initially claimed that he had remained at the barbecue throughout the afternoon. However, further investigation revealed that Santos had actually left the gathering for approximately 45 minutes during the time when Kevin disappeared. Santos had told other family members that he was going to a convenience store, but store records showed no evidence of his visit. When confronted with this discrepancy, Santos initially maintained his original story but eventually broke down and confessed to his role in Kevin's disappearance. The confession revealed a tragic sequence of events that had begun as a misguided attempt to teach Kevin a lesson. According to Santos' confession, he had become frustrated with Kevin's behavior during the hide-and-seek game and had decided to hide the boy in Chen's basement as a prank. Santos had known about the basement window from previous visits to the neighborhood and had thought it would be amusing to let Kevin hide there while the family searched for him. Santos claimed that he had planned to retrieve Kevin after a short time, but when he returned to the basement several hours later, he found that Kevin had become trapped and had died from lack of oxygen in the confined space. Panicked by what had happened, Santos had buried Kevin's body in the basement and had never revealed his role in the boy's death. The confession explained how Kevin had ended up in Chen's basement and why he had been able to write the note documenting his captivity. Santos had left Kevin in what he thought was a safe hiding place, not realizing that the confined space would become a death trap. However, investigators found several inconsistencies in Santos' confession that suggested he was not telling the complete truth. The forensic evidence indicated that Kevin had been held captive for several days, not just a few hours as Santos claimed. Further investigation revealed that Santos had a history of inappropriate behavior with children and had been suspected of abuse in previous incidents that had not been reported to authorities. The evidence suggested that Kevin's captivity had been intentional rather than accidental. The complete truth emerged when investigators discovered that Santos had been sexually abusing Kevin during his captivity in the basement. Kevin's note had been his attempt to document not only his imprisonment but also the abuse he was suffering. Santos had used the basement as a secret location where he could abuse Kevin without detection, telling the boy that he would hurt his family if Kevin made any noise or tried to escape. When Kevin had become too sick to continue enduring the abuse, Santos had killed him and buried the body. On September 15, 1995, Miguel Santos was arrested and charged with the kidnapping, sexual abuse, and murder of Kevin Martinez. The evidence against him included his confession, forensic evidence from the basement, and testimony from other family members about his suspicious behavior. Santos' trial began in early 1996, where the full extent of his crimes was revealed to a horrified jury. The note that Kevin had written while being held captive was presented as evidence, providing a heartbreaking account of a child's final days. Santos was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The conviction brought some measure of justice for Kevin's family, though it could never heal the pain of losing their son to someone they had trusted. The case had a profound impact on the Martinez family and the broader community, revealing how predators could hide within families and use positions of trust to victimize children. Kevin's story became part of educational programs designed to protect children from abuse. Harold Chen was cleared of any involvement in Kevin's death, though the trauma of discovering that his basement had been used as a prison and burial site prompted him to sell his house and move away from the neighborhood. He had been an unwitting victim of Santos' crimes. For the Martinez family, Santos' conviction provided closure but also opened new wounds as they learned the full extent of what Kevin had suffered during his final days. The note he had written became a testament to his courage and a reminder of the need to protect children from those who would harm them. Final words. The conviction of Miguel Santos in 1996 brought closure to one of Riverside County's most heartbreaking child murder cases. Kevin Martinez's hidden note had provided the crucial evidence needed to solve his disappearance and expose the truth about his final days. The case led to significant changes in how law enforcement investigates missing children cases, particularly emphasizing the importance of thoroughly examining all properties in the immediate vicinity of a child's disappearance. Kevin's story demonstrated that victims could be held very close to where they vanished. The Martinez family established the Kevin Martinez Foundation, which provides education about child abuse prevention and supports families of missing children. They worked tirelessly to ensure that Kevin's death would help protect other children from similar fates. The note that Kevin wrote while imprisoned became a powerful symbol of a child's courage in the face of unimaginable terror. His words provided not only the evidence needed to convict his killer, but also a final message of love to his family that helped them find some measure of peace. Harold Chen's house was eventually demolished, and a small memorial garden was established on the site in Kevin's memory. The garden serves as a reminder of a young life lost and the importance of protecting children from those who would harm them. Kevin Martinez's case remains one of the most tragic examples of how predators can hide within families and communities, using trust and access to victimize children. His story continues to educate law enforcement, families, and communities about the need for vigilance in protecting the most vulnerable members of society. The note hidden behind a wall had waited 4 years to tell its story. When it finally did, it provided justice for Kevin Martinez and demonstrated that even in the darkest circumstances, the truth can eventually emerge to bring both answers and justice to those who seek them.